Hello and welcome to The Green Room, a series of conversations hosted by Pratadhwani. It's conversations with our creative community. My name is Agastya. I lead the drama wing of Pratadhwani, and today we are joined by two Seattle theater and community stalwarts in Kathy Hsieh and Val Curtis Newton. Thank you both of you for being here and joining us. I'm going to take 1 second, do a reload on the Facebook page, make sure this video is actually live, and here you go. I see it already. And then, first of all, I want to start by wishing both of you a happy birthday. Val, a little bit belated, and Kathy, yours is coming up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any big celebrations?
We do. We do rule the world. And if we don't, we should.
Well, I'm not a Virgo, but I'm smart enough to marry one. So my wife is one too. So it's all good.
Smart man. Smart man.
Yeah. I figured if we're gonna need to negotiate with world rulers, I might as well be on the right side of that. Were you able to do anything well to celebrate the birthday?
We had a socially distant cocktail party down at my wife's shop, which was really lovely. Everybody was 6 feet apart in masks until you were drinking, but it was really nice and a small group. It was so good to be with people live. After 6 months of just Zooming and mediated interactions, it was really good to be able to be together.
Yeah,
it was great. It was a great gift.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it. And Kathy, last year we were in the middle of Washer Dryer production, and so we were able to sing "Happy Birthday" to you after one of the performances. What do you have coming up this year?
For my birthday,
yeah.
Probably. Well, actually, just gathering with some friends just to chat on Zoom. That's the best you can do. But that's actually, I'm looking forward to that because I'm such an introvert that I actually thrive in the kind of environment we've been in, oddly enough. But I have to remind myself to connect with other people. And whenever I do, I actually love just time chatting with others. So that'll be lovely.
Yeah,
one of the great things about being on a platform for celebrations like that is that people can join you from all over the world, which is really, really beautiful.
Yeah. And speaking of birthdays and celebrations, Sis just had a milestone as well. What was it, about a month ago, Kathy?
August 10th. Yes,
August 10th.
A month ago. Yeah, 20 years we've been around. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Awesome.
To the next 20 years, right? So that's actually a good segue into what's going on with Sis for the next 20 years, or at least the next 20 weeks. Kathy, what do you think is going on?
We're trying to get by the next 20 minutes. Of course, this year all the theaters were the first to close, and they're going to be the last to reopen. So it's been a year about planning and replanning again. I think what we've decided to do, because the plays that we were going to do, some of the playwrights just don't feel like Zoom or online is the platform for it, and completely respect those decisions, because some of them were going to be world premieres. So instead, what we've decided to do is it might be an odd mix. We're going to explore this Zoom realm, and not necessarily calling it theater, but just ways to connect with our audience and our artists. So we'll be announcing some stuff soon. I've always got a lot of different ideas, so just sharing some of them with you here. You're the first to hear this. So some of it might be bringing back some stuff like we did actually at our last Represent Multicultural Playwrights Festival, we had invited a dozen women, Asian American women, to share their personal stories in a reading format. And so we might bring some of those back in a Zoom format. It's actually perfect for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that way get the story out to far more people. Also, one of my crazy ideas is I've always wanted to do ghost stories, and I thought actually doing ghost stories as a radio format, Chinese or Asian ghost stories in a radio format, would be really fun. So I'm working on that. And then the other thing which we're going to be doing, we started doing this at our 20th celebration. We kind of invited all these different Asian American actors, designers, people here locally. And a number of them showed up on our birthday day. And we actually had a meeting to just talk about how we could support Black Lives Matter movement. And I'll share a little bit more about that when we get to that part of today's segment about a new way of kind of focusing on that kind of work.
Great, great. Look forward to that. So it's funny you mentioned the CIS celebration, which was a Zoom thing, and one of the special guests that you had was Matt De La Cruz from New York, and the other day, Mark. Sorry, what did I say?
Matt also wants to go to Broadway, and he will.
Yeah, Matt DC is a different guy. Yes, sorry about that. But Mark was on, and the other day I was just found online that Nandita Shenoy, who wrote Washer Dryer, which was our last show together, wrote a play that Mark was starring in, and so I found a little collision of worlds coming together there, and it was good to see him perform a sci-fi play set in futuristic space or something.
For people who don't know who Mark De La Cruz is, he's the first Asian American to perform in the title role of Hamilton, plus a number of other roles
on Broadway.
That's awesome.
On Broadway.
And he started, one of the first roles he did was here with CIS Productions in our very first plays.
There you go. We are an incubator of Broadway talent. We've always known it. We've always said it. Well, what's going on with Hansberry?
Well, you know, a big part of what Hansberry does is supporting individual artists. So we've been doing a lot of grants and also doing some collaborative partnerships, which is sort of what has been our bread and butter over the last decade or so. I'm exploring what will happen to do a new play development with some partners from across the country. Again, looking at the digital platform, what would happen if we were associated with a theater in Atlanta, one in New York, one in another one in the Midwest, and the four of us made a whole year of new plays. So we're doing that. And we are making grants to individual artists who lost a ton of work. And so, and also, you know, people who are having ideas, who I scour. I'm on Facebook incessantly, but I scour a lot to see what people are up to. And then I will reach out to them and say, is there a way that Hansberry can help? And then people, they let us know what their needs are. And we do our best to fill them or support them in getting them connected in ways that get the needs met. So we try to amplify the work in that way.
So tell us more about that. So, you know, Hansberry is looking to make grants to individual artists. How do individuals help Hansberry do that more?
I think that it's a little bit, it is a kind of reciprocity. That one of the ways that it's a big cycle, and Kathy, you know this from your work as a grantor, is that you give money to people and they do things, and then you get to say that you did something by giving people the money, and then more people give you money because you're doing things. So that's the sort of cycle of it. So as we continue to offer more support to artists, the artists are doing more work. And then we get to say that Hansberry's been involved in more work. A little bit like the story that you guys just told about Mark De La Cruz. It's like you're doing the thing, and then the artists go and make more work, and then they're trailing your essence into new environments. And that's sort of what Hansberry's doing, is relying on artists to reach out when they're doing things and allowing us to participate in supporting them. And then we get to add their names to this roster of people we've supported and the kinds of work that we've done, which can make us more attractive to funders, which can help us, as you guys know this, get the piece of the pie that ethnically specific theaters are not really getting. Right. So right. We can actually tout a record of having done this now for, 16 years. Or 20 years in the case of CIS, and Pradhanwani for 17 or 18 years, right? So there's a way that we have a track record of doing what other folks are just getting to right now, and to be able to tout our experience is what supports our organization.
That's excellent. I do want to add to that a little bit, and maybe there's a question in there somewhere too, is that, one of the things that we started to look at in Pradhanwani was, fortunately, knock on wood, a lot of our membership are people who work in other industries other than arts and theater, and, Microsoft and Amazon and technology beyond those companies as well. And so many of us were able to continue to do our day jobs from home. And thank God for that, because my God, the anxiety levels that we would be dealing with, if you working from home and being isolated is bad enough, and then if there's financial uncertainty surrounding that, which so many working artists have had to deal with, right? So there was a conversation within the Pratidhwani membership of how do we help? How do we address this moment where so many of us are fortunate enough to be able to continue life sort of nearly as normal? So some of the things that we were able to do was, raise funds for our partner organizations, but beyond that, how do we support the individual? And so the Seattle Artist Relief Fund, organized under the Langston umbrella, who also happens to be our represent partner, has become that vehicle for us, right? So we've made donations to the Seattle Artist Relief Fund, and I continue to solicit that, right? Anybody who's watching this, if you're still interested in helping artists,
Absolutely.
either go look them up directly at Langston or make a donation to Pratidhwani, and we'll batch that money up and pass it along. Are there things like that you're soliciting from individuals who are able to help, Val, for the Hansberry Grants program?
Yeah, we're sort of following the same sort of example. We also are giving to Langston to support the Artist Relief Fund. And then we're doing our own legwork. We start to hear and see artists who are like, I can't make my rent this month.
Sure.
And
yeah.
and we just make sure that we do our best to support them where we can. And it is important to give, to consolidate as much as we can. And also, it's important to be mindful that there be some mechanisms that aren't labor intensive or intimidating because they're labor intensive.
Sure.
Which then means people won't apply even if they need the money. So trying to find ways to make it as easy as possible to get people in the stream in some way, supporting them, advocating, giving them advice on how to get in the stream is really important. And there are just so many artists who don't have day jobs or whose day jobs are in the arts.
Right.
All the big theaters that have been furloughing people, so many of those folks are also artists.
Yep.
Right. So finding ways to get money in their hands consistently and with not a lot of stress and strain is really important.
Yeah. Great.
So
Go ahead, Kathy.
the way that I've been just trying to support as many artists and arts organizations as possible is I used to go see a lot of live theater. I mean, like 200 shows a year, and now of course can't do that. So what I've been trying to do is watch as much of it as possible, even in the Zoom landscape, which I'm kind of like Val. I don't actually prefer that, but I'm doing it partly to learn from what is working on Zoom. And so what I've been doing is trying to every single time I see something, I've been donating to, and I've been really prioritizing anything that's made and created by BIPOC artists or companies that are supporting BIPOC artists or centering that. And that way, those donations, and a lot of them have said, any donations we collect, we're splitting with the artists. And so that's been my way of giving out to as many different groups. I am lucky I still have my day job. So I haven't been spending much money on bus fare or anything like that. So taking all of that money that I used to go traveling with and transportation and using that and go to see theater with, and just donating that directly to BIPOC artists and organizations doing the work now.
Great, thank you. So I want to stitch two of the themes that we've been sort of talking about together. One is just COVID relief because of the pandemic, because of the shutdown, the jobs that have disappeared. The other is the BIPOC artist community. So let's just take a step back. Explain, Kathy, for those of us who are not familiar, what is BIPOC?
So BIPOC is a term that has been around but has come to the fore right now. It's really a way of centering within. A lot of people have been using like people of color communities or Alana communities, different terms to encompass all the different communities that are very culturally specific based on race. And BIPOC is by centering Black, Indigenous people first, and then the other communities of color after that. But still encompassing all communities of color. And of course, politically, there's a lot of people who
Sure.
There's no ideal term, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's a shorthand term for those communities together.
And that very thing, the idea that there are so many different ways for us to describe the way that we fit together, I'm really leaning into Nicole Brewer's global majority.
Yes, I am too now.
As a phrase instead of BIPOC, it's like to be in the global majority, to rather than define us in terms of our relationship to whiteness, it actually begins to define whiteness in relationship to us.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It certainly, talk about centering in terms of who is the reference and who are you, where is the origin point. So that's right. Another way that I was thinking about it, because the question of, well, Black people are people of color, Indigenous people are people of color. So why B and I separately from POC? And one of the things that came to mind was, well, many communities of color in the history of this country have had to deal with discrimination and oppression at one time or another in one way or another, but there are very few things that compare to slavery or genocide. And so like those two things are significant enough that those two communities that did suffer from them do require more centering than the rest of the POC, not to minimize anybody else's struggle, but there is a contrast there. So one of the questions that came up, and I'm going to just ask this to either of you, whoever wants to jump in. One of the things that came up right after George Floyd was murdered and the BLM movement reignited across the nation, and we at Prathadhvani, found ourselves in the middle of this conversation of, we too are an organization that represents people of color. And when we see, brown face or a white guy talking, giving voice to Apu on Simpsons, we too recognize that as racist behavior. So we are a minority and we do see where we're being victimized in a similar fashion. So yes, we need to be a part of the BLM movement and say brown and Black people includes us. But then there was a different voice within our group that said, but hold on a second, are you equating brown facing on Simpsons with generations of slavery for the Black people? Are you just claiming credit, sort of hijacking somebody else's movement that requires centering? I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on what is the role of other communities of color as it relates to BLM. Is BLM more about Black lives? Is it more about racism in general? How do you frame it?
I think that if we can all align ourselves with a common purpose to destroy and dismantle white supremacy, then we're all BLM people. And then there are definitely tactics in every community that relate to that community, but the ultimate goal is to destroy white supremacy. And especially when we think about, as it relates to the police, so forth, like that there are particular policies that undermine it, that deconstruct, that explode, that disrupt white supremacy, that we can all lean into and should all lean into. I don't think that you have to be Black to value Black lives. But I think that if you say you value Black lives and you're not about disrupting white supremacy, that's a lie. And it doesn't really matter what your ethnic specificity is, that if you're not actually trying to dismantle white supremacy, then you're not on the team. And so, that's sort of my gut feeling about it. And I think that when we are focused on dismantling and disrupting white supremacy, that we have the most strong allyship, because it's a clear goal.
Sure.
It's a very clear goal, and it impacts immigrants in much the same way that it impacts Black people. That's the thing that happened with brown folks from the Middle East and India and parts of Africa after September 11th was also a part of white supremacy in action. And so recognizing that the weapons of the state can be turned on any of us at any time and will be turned on any of us at any time, based on how white supremacy is functioning in any given moment, is a thing that should keep us all vigilant and supportive of each other. We can't be crabs in a bucket, that's for sure.
For sure.
And the way that I like to look at it is, if you look at what the Black Lives Matter movement believes in, they have a whole list of beliefs. And what is central to that is the collective care of all of our communities together. It's actually going back to indigenous values of we are only as strong as our whole village together, and that we all have a role to play in that. And it's not about, as one, I was in one meeting, and a lot of the Black women who are leading the movement were saying, why would we want to do to our oppressors what our oppressors have done to us? So it really is about how we all work together, and really center our collective humanity as human beings, no matter what race or color. Race is a completely fabricated concept. We're all human beings biologically. And so the reality is when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, the role that we each have in it, it's inclusive of everybody, including white people. Combating white supremacy, it's something that actually destroys all of us, including white people. The only people in our country that are really benefiting from white supremacy culture are the 1% that are billionaires and holding on to their power and wealth. The only way that they can do that is to have everyone else feel like that they're the problem against each other. That's, if you go back to almost every single policy in government, in society, and culturally using the media to support it, that actually creates divisiveness. It's about pitting Black people against Asian people, or Asian people against Black people, or everyone against Indigenous people, or whomever. But the reality is that it's done very strategically and intentionally by a very small percentage of mostly white men. And that's actually hurting white people as well as everyone else. So the more that we understand what has created this structural racism, the more that we can all work together, regardless of race or ethnicity, disability, gender, sexual orientation, citizenship, to really combat what is actually not functioning or healthy for any of us. So as we've been experiencing this pandemic, the potential we have of everything's being toppling down right now, climate change, all this stuff. So the reality is this is our perfect opportunity to reimagine how do we have a collective global community working together to support the health of all of us. And that's really, I'm going to say it here, but we have to combat capitalism, and we have to combat how that and racism have always worked hand in hand to support a very small percentage of people against the rest of us. And the rest of us, we have the numbers to make that change if we can let go of those systems.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, sorry, go ahead, Val.
No, I think that there's also, for me, this, my own personal journey to live in my wholeness as a human being. And I feel like that's what my purpose on earth is, to figure out how to get through it with my humanity intact. And then what puts me in community is my commitment to making sure that the conditions exist for all of the people that I encounter to also come through with their humanity intact. And to the extent that I can stay focused on the other, to be a good scene partner, as you guys would know, means to commit to the well-being of the other, right? And when we do that, then the whole thing works. Then there's synergy and chemistry. And I don't have to protect myself because the people in my scene are protecting me. They're helping me achieve my goal, my objective. And so I'm trying more and more to look at situations. Is this advancing me toward my humanity or obstructing me from my full humanity? And then am I doing things that are helping to ease people into their full humanity, or am I an obstruction to their humanity? And that, I think, this idea of our wholeness as people, and then with the wholeness of the planet and being focused on all those things, that would be the definition of heaven. If we could all actually get there, that would be the definition of heaven.
That's actually really so aligned with my, see, us Virgos, theater Virgos. My definition of what is ideal heaven is really when every person is able to express the full spectrum of their humanity as authentically as possible, and there's no judgment. It's all about grace and compassion with each other, and where we all feel safe to do that. What a beautiful place that would be, where no one feels like they have to hide behind pretending to be something else in order to fit in to some society that they don't feel like they belong to. And yet I would put forward that I think most people feel like they have to do that. And if most people feel like they have to do that, then there's something wrong with society. And so how can we make a society where all of us feel like we can just be ourselves and
Yeah.
that love?
You know, it's interesting, Kathy, because right now I have a visceral reaction to the word safe.
Oh yeah, I hear you.
I can't, because, you know, John Lewis said you want to get into trouble. Disruption is not safe. And the idea that we want to disrupt everything and be safe while we do it, I think that that's a recipe for paralysis. But I do agree with you that people should have the resources needed to commit to action and the support necessary to feel emboldened to take action. But I think that we need to spend some time unpacking the word safety, because it's become bastardized in a way right now that I should never be uncomfortable. I should never be frightened. I should never be, no. We should be courageous. We should be brave.
Brave space. That's actually the word I've been using in my workshops around racial equity, is brave space. Because
absolutely.
Even when I said the word safe, part of my brain was like going, "Oh, some people are not going to get it, and other people are going to get it." Even I felt it in my heart when I said it.
Yes, so we don't need safety. We need bravery. We need courage.
There you go. So let's talk about that. So heaven, I guess, is in the future somewhere, but let's talk about the future that's closer to us. Is what is next? And Kathy, you sort of gave us a teaser on something you wanted to talk about. So how do we bring about this change?
So, well, this is something that I think this is going to actually focus on, and I'm personally focusing on, and actually part of my day job is focusing on. So it's all coming together. But there's been a lot when George Floyd was murdered. And all these movements happened in the theater community specifically. There was a lot of great work that's been happening around Black Broadway theater artists, Black artists all around the country, a lot of BIPOC artists, artists of the global majority, all really focusing on what do we need to fix. And that's all vital because, but one of the things that struck me when I was looking at all this, and I've had conversations with Val around this too, is when I look at all that work, this is very vital and we all need to figure this out. But it seemed like it was centering white theaters and what was wrong with white theaters. And I'm like, what about, at one meeting, which Val wasn't at, I actually said, what if instead of focusing on white theaters and what to fix with them, what if we instead centered our focus on uplifting theaters like the Hansberry Project, like Prathathwani, like CIS Productions, like theaters that are led by the global majority. And so one of the things that CIS did start to do is in our collective meeting that we had, I centered the question on what are the experiences that each of these artists have had in theaters or just in your imagination that really made you feel like so seen and heard and valued as a human being. And so the movement I'm going to, all this other work is happening and it's vital and important. And I'm no judgment. I actually have been leaning into that work as well. But I want to, for CIS and myself personally and at work, I want to start leaning into what is it that we want to see? What is that reimagining? What is it that makes us feel like we're thriving as artists of the global majority in the spaces that we want to create with each other, and starting with that question to uplift theaters like ours, as opposed to the focus always being on other theaters. But let's start with our theaters first, and how can we actually, and knowing that the biggest thing that we have not had is the financial resources in equity with other theaters. So that is a huge thing that we're focusing in on at work. And so I'm just planting the seed here for the first time publicly with all of you. I have gotten some grant funding nationally to start doing this work. And so you're going to get calls from me or emails from me very soon. Not to put more work on you, but to actually give you money to help collect the knowledge you already have in that work.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy. I think that following up on this point, exactly like how do we center ourselves and get ourselves to the table where the resources are happening? I think that the recognition that we are undercapitalized and underfunded, and how do we get in line, or how do we actually get a place at the table? It requires more uncomfortable conversations where we have to actually say to people, maybe they don't, as theaters come back online, maybe rather than giving them more money to become more equitable, what if those funds were already going to global majority projects? And how does that work? And Kathy and I were in a meeting, and I said, we talk a lot these days about what is it to defund the police. I think that there are some predominantly white institutions that also probably need a little bit of defunding. And some of the resources need to be particularly focused towards at global majority organizations. It doesn't mean I want everyone to go hungry. It just means that I want to be sure that our organizations aren't on survival rations, and other organizations are eating much better because they're now have better language for talking about equity, which doesn't necessarily make them more equitable. They have better language for talking about equity. And so I just want to make sure that we get our fair share, because our tax dollars and our ticket money is going inside those predominantly white institutions as well. And we need to get some of that out and get it to organizations like ours.
And I'm going to just do a both and here, which is that both, exactly what Val said in terms of we need more funds, like the centering, like the majority of funds that we currently have need to go towards theaters of the global majority. And I will say this, because again, I do believe in those indigenous ideas that are centered in the indigenous communities of the collective global care, which is that the arts have always been under-resourced as a whole. That a lot of our government funding goes to military or to other things and deprioritizes the arts. So because the arts have always been under-resourced, the both and I want to offer is that I actually feel that we actually, as a community in the arts, we need to draw more attention and more funding in general to our sector so that we don't have to defund while we actually invest as deeply and more deeply for reparative justice to theaters of the global majority. So that's what I'm fighting for. It's the both and. Now to get there, there's probably going to be some transition time in order to get more other resources directed to the arts. So it's going to be painful for a lot of groups, but it's been painful for a lot of our theater companies for far too long. And so there's going to be pain in the transition, but I want more people to work on the both and. How do we get more funding for the arts in general? Because the arts are healing, and the arts create much more prevention stuff where we wouldn't need to put so much money in so many of these other places as kind of like the reactionary funding, right? If we actually put it in the arts, we'd be able to prevent a lot of the stuff that all the other stuff, the money that so much of our government is going towards is the reaction because we didn't have enough arts to begin with.
Yeah, so, I agree with you, Kathy, and that it is a both and situation. And if the whole sector is on life support, and we began half a football field behind, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no more money today. while we're working in the future to more money, I agree with you. While we're working in the future to more money, but today we've got global majority companies on the edge of extinction.
Yep.
Not just because the sector's at the edge of extinction, it's because we've been starved.
Yep.
And we've gotten really good at making lemonade from lemons, from a lemon, not even from many lemons. We're making lemonade from one lemon, Kathy.
The compost, the lemon seeds, the compost.
Exactly. So I agree with you that I would be lovely if there was not the need to redistribute some of the money that's existing in arts organizations that are all underfunded. But I'm tired of the compost lemon. I want a fresh lemon, even if it's just one lemon. I want a fresh lemon, God damn it! And so
yes, that is what we're working towards.
So I agree with you. I'm feeling for you, and I don't want to imply that just building on what we have and then aiming for some future when global majority companies can get funds, that's an acceptable answer.
It has to flip now. And but this is why it's so aligned with like defund the police, right? It's because there are a lot of resources in a lot of areas that is actually moving forward now in terms of how do we shift our thinking and how all funding exists. And that work needs to happen now. But it can't sacrifice these communities that have been not resourced at all, completely under-resourced, but not resourced at all, actually, if you really look at the numbers, since the existence of the United States of America. And that has to be the first change, which is what I mean by when I say the pain. I'm sorry, the pain is actually for a lot of the companies that might have always gotten the resources. That's where the pain has to come from. But that is the white allyship. That is the white allyship. All those Black Lives Matter statements that I saw out there, this is what the action behind it means. It's like that's where your pain is going to come from to help support our whole collective health of our arts community right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So I was listening to a story about an organization that's working in not in the arts, not in theater, but just in social upliftment of the disenfranchised. And one of the things they said was, we are centering Black women in this work, and their argument was, whenever the whole trickle down thing, although these were not their words, but whenever things gradually come down the social or whatever hierarchical ladder you're looking at, the people at the bottom end up getting either the least or nothing. And so when you bring that segment into focus and center that segment, which in their work happens to be Black women, it doesn't mean that you end up taking from others, like, Val, what you were talking about, you don't end up starving others to feed this person, but the way the system is built, and it is so hard to change it, but the way the system is built, it ensures that everyone is getting fed when you focus on the least or the starved, right? So
yes,
it ends up not being a situation where others are now starving and we're doing to our oppressors what they did to us, but by centering on the needs of those that have so far been ignored, you guarantee that nobody is being ignored, and
yes,
everyone else is still able to take their slice of the pie.
So if we went one step further, it really is making sure we're focusing on Black, Indigenous, trans, disabled art. Like, if we need to make sure that at that intersectionality, we are actually really supporting and creating attention for those who have been never invited to the table. And it's high time, past time, because then everyone else will benefit if we can make sure that the people are whole that have never been able to have that.
I think that's a perfect moment to bring our conversation to a close. Thank you, Kathy, for expressing it so eloquently. Thank you both of you for joining us on this installment of the Green Room. Kathy Hsieh and Val Curtis Newton, both recipients of TPS's Gregory Falls Sustained Achievement Awards. And oh, poor Gregory's. I wish, Kathy, I think you got robbed of your nomination for Washer Dryer, but hopefully they too will return when we're all able to get back and meet in person. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure to hang out with you guys anytime.
Oh, we still have to plan the next represent.